Olive Sanders had no idea that canceling her plans and booking a last-minute spa day would lead to her entire life flipping upside down. She didn't even like spas. But after being laid off from her marketing job 2 days before her 29th birthday, and catching her ex 3 hours later kissing someone else on her own front porch, Olive had snapped. She marched into Tranquil Haven Spa with a shaky breath, her hair in a messy bun, and said the words she never thought she'd say, "I need the full package, everything." The receptionist blinked. "You mean the Bliss package? That includes a 90-minute massage, facial, hot stone therapy, yes." "All of it, and throw in the steam room. I want to sweat out my entire past." 30 minutes later, Olive sat wrapped in a white robe, sipping cucumber water and trying to convince herself that silence wasn't suffocating. The spa was high-end and painfully serene, with soft harp music, warm lighting, and fancy eucalyptus smells she couldn't identify. She looked around the lounge and lowered her voice. "I'm too broke for this," she whispered to herself. "Then you better enjoy every second of it." The voice made her jump. She turned her head and saw a man early 30s, tall, broad shoulders, dark, messy hair like he'd just run his hand through it 100 times. His jawline alone could have paid rent. He wore the same white spa robe, but with the confidence of someone who owned the building. Olive blinked. "Sorry," he smiled, not in a flirty way, just amused. "You said you're too broke for this, so enjoy it. Let the guilt hit after the massage," she groaned and covered her face. "Oh my God." "I said that out loud." "Very loud," he said, chuckling. "But it was honest. I respect it." Olive peeked through her fingers. "You're not one of those weird spa guys who talks to everyone, are you?" "No, today's my first time here." She narrowed her eyes. "You seem a little too comfortable," he shrugged. "I'm good at pretending." Before she could respond, an attendant called her name for the massage. She stood, hesitated, then looked back at him. "What's your name?" "Dane," he said. "Dane Prescott." "Olive," she said, offering a half wave. "Nice to meet you, Dane Prescott." "You too," Olive, who talks to herself. She laughed for the first time in days. After the massage, facial, and a brief nap in a room that smelled like lavender and dreams, Olive headed toward the steam room, her final stop. She hesitated at the door. The spa was co-ed, but she hadn't expected. That Dane was already inside, sitting on the tiled bench, eyes closed, with steam curling around his face like a movie scene. He looked unfairly good for someone sweating. "You stalking me now?" she teased, stepping in and adjusting her towel. His eyes opened. "You're the one who followed me." "Technically, I was booked for this." "Technically," he agreed. She sat across from him, leaving space, but not too much. The heat wrapped around them instantly, and the silence hung heavy until Dane broke it. "So, what happened?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" "You don't drop 10 hours at a spa unless something broke." Olive paused. She could lie, say she just needed a self-care day, but something about the way he asked, calm, curious, not pitying, made her tell the truth. "I got laid off. Then found my ex making out with someone on my porch. I don't even care about him, but it was just a lot." Dane's lips parted slightly. "Damn. Yeah," she said, staring at the tiled wall. "So I came here to forget I exist for a while." He nodded slowly. "Well, I'm glad you did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have met the girl who talks to herself and calls it therapy." She laughed again. "What about you? Why are you here?" He hesitated. "Business stress. Needed to disconnect." Olive tilted her head. "You're a businessman?" "Something like that." She raised an eyebrow. "That's vague." He grinned. "I'll tell you more if we ever get out of this sauna alive." They sat in the steam for another 10 minutes, talking about nothing and everything. Dane had this calm way of listening that made Olive feel like she mattered. Like she wasn't just another girl grieving a bad breakup and unemployment. When they finally stepped out of the steam room, sweaty, flushed, and dazed, Olive turned to him in the hallway. "Thanks for not being weird or creepy or boring," he smiled. "You're welcome." She hesitated before walking away. "Hey, Dane. Yeah, if you ever want to keep talking. I'm usually in the real world, unemployed and drinking bad coffee." He looked at her for a long second, then pulled a sleek black card from the pocket of his robe and handed it to her. "Come to this place tomorrow at 7. Order the filet. Don't look at the prices." She stared at the card. It had the name of an upscale steakhouse printed in gold letters. She looked up at him, wide-eyed. "Wait." Are you serious? Dead serious. Are you rich or something? She asked, half joking. He just smiled. See you tomorrow, Olive. Olive stood outside the restaurant with her hair curled, heart pounding, and a dress she definitely couldn't afford. She'd borrowed it from her friend Maya, who worked in wardrobe for a local theater company and had access to everything from cocktail attire to full-blown opera gowns. This one was sleek and black, with thin straps and a neckline that made her feel braver than she was. The restaurant loomed behind her, all glass and steel with a valet line of sleek cars that probably cost more than her student loans. A doorman opened the door before she could lose her nerve. Inside, it was all polished wood floors, soft lighting, and the faint clink of crystal and laughter. A hostess greeted her with a warm smile. Name, Olive Sanders. I'm meeting someone. The hostess glanced at a tablet. Right this way. She led Olive through the main dining area and up a curved staircase to a smaller, more intimate section with a view of the skyline. Dane was already seated at a corner table, his jacket draped over the back of his chair, glass of something amber in his hand. He stood when he saw her, and for a second, Olive forgot how to breathe. You clean up well, he said, eyes trailing down her in a way that wasn't leering, just quietly appreciative. And you look exactly like someone who owns half this building, she replied, sliding into the seat across from him. Only a third, he said without missing a beat. She looked at him, trying to tell if he was joking. His expression gave nothing away. A waiter appeared, placing menus in front of them, but Dane waved them off. She's having the filet, he told the server. Medium rare. Olive arched a brow. Confident, aren't you? I remember what people say, he replied. You told me not to look at the prices. That was before I realized this place probably charges extra for air. He laughed quietly, then signaled for a bottle of red wine already being opened at a nearby station. The sommelier brought it over, poured a taste, and Dane nodded once. Olive watched the scene unfold like a silent performance. Everything about him tonight was deliberate, measured, smooth, somehow both effortless and exact. So, she said once the wine was poured. Are you going to tell me what exactly your job is, or do I have to Google you later and pretend I didn't? He leaned back slightly. What do you think I do? You give off I make decisions that affect the stock market energy, but you're too relaxed for banking, maybe venture capital. Private equity, he tilted his head. Close. Don't tell me, you're one of those guys who buys failing companies and flips them like houses. I don't flip them, he said. I rebuild them, she blinked. Seriously, he nodded. I run a firm that acquires struggling businesses. We restructure, rebrand, and either sell or reintegrate them. It's messy, but it keeps me interested. Olive stared at him. That's wildly impressive and kind of terrifying. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied her in a way that made her feel like pages being turned. What? You didn't flinch? At what? Most people do something weird when they find out. Start calculating what I'm worth. You didn't do that, she shrugged. I'm still trying to figure out how to pay rent next month. Your net worth doesn't affect my Wi-Fi bill. That made him laugh again, more freely this time. You're not what I expected. Good, she said, taking a sip of wine, because I'm not changing for anyone. Their food arrived, her filet perfectly cooked and his sea base. Conversation drifted from books to cities they'd loved, to the worst first dates they'd endured. Olive surprised herself with how easily she opened up. There was something about Dane that made you forget where the exits were. He listened without interrupting, occasionally asking questions that made her feel like he was actually interested, not just nodding along until it was his turn to speak. By the time dessert hit the table, Olive had forgotten everything else: the layoff, the porch kiss, the gnawing panic about her future. Why me? She asked suddenly, pushing the last piece of chocolate cake around her plate. Out of everyone you could have dinner with, why pick the girl who was falling apart in a bathrobe? He looked at her for a long moment. Because you weren't pretending. Everyone puts on a mask in places like that, like they're above stress or pain. But you were you. And I liked that. She looked down, not sure what to say to that. The honesty of it hit somewhere deep. Plus, he added, you made me laugh. I hadn't done that in a while. She glanced up. You don't laugh often, not lately. He didn't explain, and she didn't push. Instead, she finished her wine and leaned her chin on her hand. "So what now?" He looked at her, unreadable again. "Now I walk you out, and if tomorrow you decide this was a fun one-time dinner, I'll respect that, but if you want to see what happens next, I'll be here." She followed him downstairs, the wine warming her veins, heart thudding with something she hadn't felt in too long possibility. Outside, the valet brought around a sleek black car. Dane tipped the driver and turned to her. "Want a ride?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "I think I need to walk. Let it all sink in." He nodded, not disappointed, just understanding. "Thank you," she said, stepping back onto the sidewalk. "For dinner? For making me feel like I wasn't invisible." He held her gaze. "You never were." He got in the car, the door clicking shut like the end of a scene, and drove off into the night. Olive stood there for a long time after, the city humming around her, wondering how one day one stranger could turn everything inside out. Olive didn't expect to see Dane again so soon. She certainly didn't expect to find him standing in the middle of the community center gymnasium, surrounded by folding tables, mismatched banners, and a cluster of overcooked meatballs. "You're kidding me," she whispered, frozen in the doorway. He turned at the sound of her voice, paused, and then smiled, not amused, not smug, just genuinely glad to see her. "You made it," he said, wiping his hands on a towel. "You look less surprised than I thought you'd be. I thought you were going to be in a glass tower somewhere. Not running a fundraiser in a building that smells like old sneakers. Technically, I'm sponsoring it. My assistant said the caterer bailed last minute, so I've been plating snacks and negotiating with a fifth grader over cupcake rations." Olive blinked. "You're serious?" He nodded toward a long table where two women were arranging silent auction items: a signed basketball, a weekend cabin rental, a gift certificate for salsa lessons. "I volunteer here sometimes." Quietly, "The director's an old family friend." She stared at him, processing that. "You kept that quiet?" "You didn't ask." She walked in, her heels echoing on the scuffed court floor. "So, what exactly is this?" "A community outreach event. They raise money for after-school programs, college prep, meals during holiday breaks." "It's not flashy, but it matters." Olive folded her arms. "And you thought I'd be into this?" "I thought you wouldn't run from it." She looked around again. The decorations were basic, the crowd modest, but there was heart in every corner. A teenager in the corner was playing violin for tips. A group of older women were selling homemade jam near the entrance. "This is kind of great," she admitted. "I hoped you'd think so." He gestured toward the back, where a table had been set with two folding chairs and a red and white checkered tablecloth. A plastic sign read, "Reserved." "You saved me a seat." "Only fair. You fed me steak, I give you lukewarm ziti and community spirit." She laughed. "This is the most unexpected date I've ever been on." He handed her a plate. "Then let's make it unforgettable." They sat together, eating while the buzz of conversation swirled around them. Olive found herself scanning the room, noticing how many people waved at Dane, how easily he slipped into this world. It didn't match the version of him she'd imagined, the one who paid for overpriced wine and closed business deals with a nod. "You're different here," she said between bites. "Lighter. I don't have to perform here. No boardrooms, no press. Just you and a serving spoon." He looked at her. "And you?" She felt heat rise to her cheeks and immediately took a sip of the fruit punch to cover it. A woman in her 60s approached their table, balancing a tray of cookies and wearing a name tag that read, "Joyce Program Director." "Dane, we're short on volunteers for the raffle table again." "Can I steal you?" He stood, then paused. "Come help me." Olive blinked. "Now, you'll love it, I promise." 15 minutes later, she found herself standing behind a folding table filled with neon-colored tickets and a giant glass fishbowl. Dane stood beside her, casually rolling up his sleeves. "You're used to this?" she asked, watching as people dropped dollar bills into a donation jar. "Not exactly, but I've done worse." "Like?" "Once had to wear a foam hot dog suit for a local baseball team's charity night." She choked on a laugh. "Please tell me there are pictures." "There are not," he said, deadpan. "And if there were, they've been destroyed." Convenient. They fell into a rhythm. He collected tickets, she called names. A boy won a skateboard and screamed loud enough to shake the rafters. An elderly man won salsa lessons and winked at his wife. Olive didn't realize she was smiling until Dane leaned close and said, "You're good at this." She tilted her head. At raffles, at making people feel seen. She tried to brush off the compliment, but it stuck in her chest like a warm ember. The raffle ended, and as the crowd dispersed, Olive felt a tug on her arm. A little girl with pigtails and paint-smeared hands held out a folded piece of construction paper. "I made this," she said shyly. "For you." Olive crouched and unfolded the paper. Inside was a drawing of two people, one tall, one short, holding hands beneath a big yellow sun. The short one had curly brown hair. "That's me," the girl said proudly. "And that's you." Before Olive could respond, she scampered off. Dane watched her quietly. "You made a friend. She doesn't even know my name." "Doesn't matter, she liked your energy." Olive turned to him. "You're full of surprises, you know that." He didn't answer right away. Then, softer, "So are you." The evening wound down. Tables were cleared, chairs stacked. Dane offered to drive her home, and this time she said yes. Inside the car, sleek, silent, and somehow warmer than she expected, Olive glanced at him. "Why me?" He didn't pretend to misunderstand. "You make me forget who I'm supposed to be and remember who I actually am." The car slowed to a stop in front of her building. She turned to him, heart thundering. "Dane, yeah, if you kiss me right now, it better not be a maybe." He looked at her for half a breath, then leaned in and kissed her slow, certain, and without hesitation. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "It's not a maybe." And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. It had been 12 days since the fundraiser, 12 days since the kiss. And in that time, Olive had somehow gone from no job, no plan, and a very expensive spa bill to sitting in a sunlit boardroom on the 37th floor of a building that practically touched the clouds. She wore a fitted navy blazer she'd gotten on clearance, heels she still hadn't broken in, and a thin gold bracelet Dane had given her 3 days ago. No note, no explanation, just a sleek box on her doorstep with her name written in his handwriting. She hadn't taken it off since. Across the table, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a sharper stare clicked her pen once and said, "We're prepared to offer you the interim creative consultant role. Full-time, 6 months with the option to extend." Olive blinked. "Wait. You're serious?" The woman didn't smile, but her tone softened. "Your mock pitch was the strongest we've seen in a long time. The rebranding concept for the Walker campaign was exactly what we needed." Olive let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I accept." The woman nodded once, stood, and extended her hand. "Welcome to Prescott and Reed." As Olive walked back out through the glass atrium, heart still racing, she spotted Dane leaning against the reception desk, arms crossed casually. "You were eavesdropping," she said. He pushed off the desk. "I was standing nearby, entirely coincidental. You're on the 37th floor. This is your company. That doesn't mean I don't like good news in person." She tried to keep her tone even. "You didn't pull strings, right?" He shook his head. "You earned it. I only told them to give you a real shot. The rest was you." She looked at him and saw the truth in his face. "Thank you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch, handing it to her without ceremony. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a key, brass, smooth. Plain, except for a tiny engraving on the handle. 28C. She stared at it. "You're giving me an apartment?" "I'm giving you a place that's yours when you need it. No strings, no expectations, just a space with working heat and a view that doesn't involve a brick wall." Her voice was careful. "That's a big gesture. You deserve big things." She met his gaze. "You really mean that, don't you?" He stepped closer. "There's something I haven't told you yet." Olive's stomach twisted. "If you're secretly married or have a secret twin, now's the time." He laughed, but there was tension in his shoulders. "No, nothing like that. Just, my father died when I was 22. He built this company from nothing. I inherited it before I understood what it meant to carry something that heavy." She nodded slowly, letting him speak. "I've spent the last 10 years trying to make this empire mean something, but it was all plans and numbers. Then I met you. And suddenly, it mattered whether I laughed. Whether someone saw me, not just the brand." Olive's throat tightened. You think I changed you? I know you did. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I fell in love with you in a steam room, he said. But I didn't realize it until I watched you talk a stranger into donating his last $20 at her raffle table. She swallowed hard. You're serious? I am, and I know it's fast. But I also know that every moment I'm not with you feels like I'm standing still. She stepped back, just enough to gather her thoughts. I don't want to be a project or a way for you to feel grounded. You're not. You're the reason I stopped feeling lost. The elevator chimed behind them and someone brushed past with a stack of folders. Olive barely noticed. I don't want to be someone you rescue, she said. You're not. You're someone I admire. Someone I want to build with. She looked down at the key in her hand. Say it again, she said softly. I love you. She nodded once, and then did something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. She stepped forward and kissed him first. When they broke apart, she whispered, I love you too. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. You sure? He asked. I'm sure. That night, he took her to a private rooftop dinner, no staff, no crowd, just candles, wine, and the city stretched out like something they could rewrite together. A violinist played somewhere out of sight. She didn't ask how he arranged it. She didn't need to. As they danced barefoot under the stars, Olive looked up at Dane and asked, Do you think we would have met without the spa? Maybe, but I wouldn't have noticed you. Why not? Because I wasn't ready to see someone like you until that exact moment. She rested her head on his shoulder. I guess I needed to fall apart before I could fall in love. He kissed the top of her head. You didn't fall apart, you cracked open. There's a difference. The city buzzed below them, alive with light and sound, but up here it was just them. In the months that followed, Olive's position at Prescott and Reed shifted from interim to permanent. She never used the apartment key, not because she didn't want to, but because Dane insisted she move in with him instead. Not in a penthouse, not in a mansion, but in a quiet brownstone with a rooftop garden and a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon every Sunday. They traveled, they argued, they laughed, they disagreed about curtains, they made up in the hallway. On the anniversary of the day they met, he took her back to Tranquil Haven Spa, booked the same package, and at the end of the massage handed her a ring wrapped in eucalyptus leaves. She didn't cry until after she said yes. And no matter how much time passed, no matter how many boardrooms or business deals came and went, Dane never forgot the way Olive looked the first time he saw her wrapped in a robe, hair wild, heartbroken, and still somehow the most honest thing he'd ever seen. She'd stepped into the steam room looking for an escape. She walked out with a future. Olive didn't know what love felt like until she lived inside it. It wasn't grand declarations every day or sweeping gestures at every turn. It was Dane humming while he brewed coffee before meetings. It was his hand finding hers under the table when she was nervous in a room full of executives. It was how he listened, really listened, when she told him about a campaign idea or a dream she'd had at 3 a.m, and it was the way he let her in. Not into his penthouse or his world, though she had keys to both, but into his quiet, vulnerable places. The ones he didn't trust easily. The ones that carried the weight of legacy and pressure and a name that opened doors but also chained him to expectations not always his own. They'd been living together for 5 months when the first real storm hit, not between them, but around them. Prescott and Reed was facing a hostile acquisition attempt from a rival firm. One of Dane's board members had leaked information, and suddenly headlines were questioning everything: the company's future, Dane's leadership, even Olive's role as someone they dared to call a distraction in a glossy magazine spread. Dane came home unusually silent that night, tossing his tie onto the entry table and loosening his cufflinks with jerky movements. I should have seen it coming, he muttered, pacing the living room. Merritt's been circling for years. I gave him too much ground. You're not responsible for someone else's betrayal, Olive said, standing from the couch. You don't control his decisions. I do control mine, Dane snapped, then winced. Sorry, that wasn't at you. I know, she said gently. But if you don't talk to me, I can't help. He rubbed his jaw, the tension in his shoulders refusing to ease. They're going to make this personal. They already have. They'll use you to paint me as distracted, irrational. Nepotism, emotional compromise, whatever sticks. Let them try, she said steadily. Dane looked at her, surprised. I'm not afraid of being seen with you, she continued. I'm afraid of you pushing me away to protect me when I never asked you to, he exhaled slowly. The board's meeting tomorrow. It'll be ugly? Then let's be ugly together, she said, crossing the room, but don't stand there and act like you're alone in this. The next day she walked into the boardroom beside him, chin lifted, eyes clear. She wasn't there as a shield, she was there as a force in her own right. Dane didn't hide her. He introduced her as the lead strategist behind their most successful campaign that quarter. He presented numbers, growth, market expansion. He let the data speak for itself, and then, when one board member tried to suggest that his personal relationship compromised his objectivity, Olive stood before anyone else could. You don't get to use me as a scapegoat for your own discomfort with a woman having influence, she said, voice even. I didn't ask to be here because of who I'm dating. I'm here because I deliver results, and if you can't separate that from your own insecurities, that's not my problem. The room fell into a stunned silence. Dane's fingers brushed hers under the table. The vote held. Prescott and Reed remained in Dane's hands. That night, instead of celebrating with champagne or a fancy dinner, they sat barefoot on the kitchen floor, eating takeout straight from the boxes. You were incredible, he said, passing her the last dumpling. You didn't do so badly yourself, she teased. He leaned back against the cabinets. I've never let anyone in the way I've let you in. I know, she said softly. That's not easy for me. I'm not going anywhere. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet ring box. She froze. I was going to wait, he said. Do it somewhere dramatic. But then I realized, that's not us, this is you, me, the floor, and noodles. He opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike anything she'd imagined. No giant stone, no excessive sparkle. Just a thin platinum band with a delicate curve like the shape of a river bend. I don't need a spectacle, he said. I just need you, all of you, every version for every day that follows. She stared at him, heart thudding. You're proposing to me after I called a board member insecure in front of 12 other people, he smiled. That was the moment I knew I'd never love anyone more. She reached for the ring, then stopped. Wait, do you have a speech prepared? Not really. Good. I hate speeches. She slid the ring onto her finger. Yes, Dane let out a breath, leaned forward, and kissed her like the rest of the world could wait. They got married in the garden behind their brownstone. No press, no fanfare. Just 50 people, string lights, and a playlist they made the night before. Her dress was simple. His vows were not. They didn't promise perfection. They promised presence, partnership, patience. After the ceremony, Olive's former boss approached her with a job offer at her rival firm. She declined without hesitation. I already built the career I want, she said, and I'm not done building it. 2 years later, Olive launched her own creative agency from a converted loft space. Dane helped with the contracts. She helped him reimagine his firm's community division. They worked late sometimes, argued over furniture, adopted a rescue dog with more energy than either of them. They traveled to cities they loved and returned to the places that shaped them. And every year, on the anniversary of the spa day that started it all, Dane booked the same package massage, facial, steam room. He never called it tradition. She never forgot that it was. The last time they went, he surprised her at the end with a new key. What's this for? She asked, brow raised. Our new place in Florence, he said. You said you always wanted to live abroad for a while. She stared at him. You actually bought it. I bought us time, he said. We can always come back. But I don't want to waste a minute. We could be living something new. She kissed him in the spa lobby, uncaring of the stares. They moved 6 weeks later. Sometimes, love didn't come with fireworks or perfect timing. Sometimes it came with a spa robe, a borrowed dress, and a man who saw you when the rest of the world didn't. And sometimes that was more than enough. It was everything.